So, welcome to another episode. So, today we have Alex Kain on, who is an author, philosopher, and systems thinker. So, welcome to today's episode.
Thanks, Joel, for having me.
So, what do you mean by systems thinker? I think for certain phrases, everyone has their own interpretation of what that can mean. What does it mean for you?
Well, look, I guess it comes from my background in business process optimization. So, looking at businesses, looking at process systems, and pulling them all apart effectively, and just looking at, well, can this all be done better? So that's where all this comes from. The way I think, I guess, as a systems thinker, is about how do things work, and do we just accept that this is how they have to work? I say in the book, question everything, because effectively the world is governed by systems and processes, and some of them we accept and think that they are immovable, and other things we can challenge them. And I'm saying, well, we should really be questioning everything. So it's that view of how things are connected and what we're prepared to accept.
I love the analogy there of thinking and asking the right questions, because I think this man behind me, Socrates, was renowned for asking questions, because I think that's the only way that you can really get answers to look at something.
Unfortunately, he paid the price for that, didn't he?
Well, exactly. But it's still the right thing to do, and that's one of the things that was great about him. He didn't change his philosophy, for want of a better a better word. He accepted his fate and stuck to his guns, much like I don't know if you've seen Game of Thrones, Ned Stark, when he says, "Do you think my life is so precious to me? I was a soldier, blah 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 blah." And I think that's a real important thing to understand about being a human, and specifically a man, is to stick with your guns, man.
Well, you got to know who you are firstly, right? So, and then you've got to go, well, am I all in on this? Is this me, and am I prepared to back myself? A lot of people have done that and paid the price for it, but a lot of other people have done it. And, when you are your most truest, authentic self is when you feel the most connected to everything. You feel like everything you're doing has purpose, meaning, and it's very real. And, without purpose and meaning in our lives, where are we? What have we got left?
100%. And I think that's something that you develop as you sort of, I don't want to say get older, because I think that's a linear uh, description, that it's just age that defines that. I think it's a maturity that's obviously is correlatory to age, I think, but it doesn't mean it's a causation. The whole causation correlation fallacy. Just because you get older doesn't mean that you're necessarily maturing, and obviously that the age of maturity definitely moves depending on the person you are as well. But I think definitely in today's day and age, with the sort of capitalist monetary system, people are seeking meaning. So as someone going into a business then, and looking at systems and how to improve systems, is meaning even forming part of that?
Well, it can. Unfortunately, a lot of our meaning is tied up with wealth creation these days, right? And the system again enforces upon us that in order to be successful in this world, we need to accrue wealth. And unfortunately, for some people, that becomes the only real goal in their life. And other things fall by the wayside and suffer as a result of that. Um, so meaning can be aligned with creating wealth. That's one thing. But in the book, I also talk about we need to redefine what success actually means, for ourselves and for society. Does it mean he who dies with the most toys wins? And I'm suggesting that's fairly hollow if that's all there is to go after. So we need to understand, to be a successful society, it can't simply be about getting to the finish line with the most stuff. It's got to be about creating meaning along the way. It's got to be about contribution. It's got to be about not just my race, but our race.
Definitely. And I think that, especially as you say, the sort of standardized version of what success is financial. But there's a whole sort of wheel of life, isn't there? There's, friends, family, hobbies, interests, health, growth. That's personal growth, of course. And all of these different metrics, career, because money and career can be two separate things in terms of, yes, you can be wealthy, but are you in a position of, or are you involved in a career that you actually enjoy, meaning, all of these sorts of things. So I think that it's just the metrics. I mean, this, going into businesses and looking at how they operate and how they can improve. It depends on the metrics that you're looking at as to what you focus on. And if you're just focused on this metric over here, this bottom line figure, you can end up, pissing off customers, pissing off staff because you're trying to make cuts. But actually, in order to be a super successful business, I think all stakeholders actually need to be happy. The customer needs to be happy, or client. The employees need to be happy. The shareholders need to be happy. The business needs to be happy itself. So, yeah, I think it's just the way that we're measuring things aren't necessarily correct. As you said, maybe it is. How do we put a number on employee satisfaction and add that into the success matrix?
Yeah, well, you imagine a world where, let's say we didn't need money. Let's say housing, food was provided for us. Our lives would look very different. We wouldn't just be going and doing work to get money to put food on the table, which a lot of people, that's their existence. It's surviving. There's very little time left to go and follow creative pursuits or to self-actualize, according to Maslow. We don't necessarily all have that luxury to be able to create or find the things that are meaningful for us. Like if I'm a creative person and let's say I just love painting, can I live off that? Well, if I'm in the top 1% of painters, maybe. But maybe I just get enjoyment and it gives me meaning to be able to get my thoughts down and paint all day. Problem is I've got to go to work probably all week to earn a living so I can live. And then maybe on the weekend I get a little bit of time to do the things that actually really drive me. And that's what a shame that is, that's life, that, we are spending most of our time just trying to live. And even that phrase, earn a living, think about that. You're earning just to live. And then if you're lucky, you get some time to go and do other things that you really want to do. And I think we've got this all the way backwards. I do talk in the book also about things like a universal basic income, which, there are countries that are doing that now where an amount of money is paid every month or on a regular basis to its constituents, which allows them not necessarily to live a glamorous life, but certainly to cover some of life's basic needs. And what that has shown is that, people think, well, if you're doing that, people just drop out of the workforce, or who's going to do the work? But that's not the case at all. What happens is it gives people choices. Maybe people will cut back, from full-time to maybe part-time and have more time to do other things. Maybe they'll do other volunteering and other ways of contributing. It just gives them that safety net. It's been running in Alaska for quite some time now. They've taken the natural resources there and utilized them to actually provide for everyone. So everyone there gets paid out every year an amount of money. Now, it's not huge amounts of money, but again, it's heading in the right direction. And I think we need to think more about, particularly in today's day and age with AI on the horizon, not even on the horizon, it's here now. We're seeing the whole workforce shift. Maybe this is the prompt that we need to say, well, if AI is going to do a whole lot of heavy lifting, do we really need to have humans just tied to their desk to do this stuff still? Are we still going to follow the old industrial revolution mentality, or can we now reinvent ourselves?
I think the problem is, though, is you could be in a position where there is universal basic income. It is provided by the elites. It is conditional based on certain things. You then lose any element of trying to cut climb a ladder, and I'm not saying that climbing a ladder is a good thing, but to generate more status, more power, etc., if that's what you want to do, has now been hindered by the fact that you have a universal basic income that won't allow you to maybe grow beyond the ceiling, and then you're maybe verging into the side of socialism. Because actually, if AI does come in, well, it is coming in, so scratch that does, because it will. The big companies are going to be the ones that benefit from them, from that implementation. Their profits increase, etc., and the universal basic income is going to come from them. So then you say, well, actually, these very few people are benefiting. Then do you then say, well, everyone should own everything, and then you're in a socialism or socialist situation?
Yeah. So I'll take some points there. Firstly, I'll just say that the term socialism has a lot of negative connotations for a lot of people. But there are aspects of socialism that I think are good, as are there in capitalism and a whole lot of isms. Universal basic income, how it's funded, there are many different mechanisms to do that. So it's not necessarily coming from the companies. It can come from taxes. It can come from wealth taxes. It can come from a number of different means. But what it does do is it doesn't create a ceiling at all. What it does do is create a floor. So we're not saying that just because you've got universal basic income, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to strive for anything more. What we're saying is this is a safety net. This is the minimum quality of life that everyone should have available to them. From there, it's your choice. If you just want to paint all day in the sun, good luck to you. Go and do that. If you want to go and build a business and do other great things, go and do that. What we're saying is providing dignity, a minimum level of dignity for every human being, I think should be mandatory as part of humanity, that we are all connected. It's not about going, well, this is me and that's them. This is why we have wars. This is why we have conflict, because we don't see it as us. We see it as me, mine, and them. And all a UBI does is say everyone's entitled to that minimum level of quality of life. We can go from there and talk about, a lot of people have found in these places where they're doing it that they've been able to follow some of those other pursuits, maybe stay home and look after their aging parents without feeling so much pressure to work. It allows parents to stay home a bit more with their kids. It actually changes the fabric of society by changing the dynamics that are at play. And so we're not saying here that it's stifling creativity and growth. We're saying what it's doing is actually enabling it by providing that basic floor.
But again, let's play devil's advocate here. If you look at some of the most influential people in history, they came from tough times because it gave them the hunger to build a business. It gave them the hunger to fight and become a fighter because it gave them that, that fire in the belly, as it were. And then you have, music artists, let's say rapper like Eminem. Without the stuff he went through, he wouldn't have created, his masterpieces in respect to lyrics, etc. So if you do then go down the minimum quality of life situation, the whole survival of the fittest, you then lack any sort of ambition, possibly, because there's two ways to sort of get people to do what to become their best self, and one is desperation and the other is inspiration. And if you take away the desperation, all you're left with is inspiration, which is not there for everyone, if that makes sense. So maybe there's a situation there where it might not be for the best. On paper, yes, you've got no one suffering, but in terms of creating that level of genius, do you think that it could have a hindrance on that at all?
Look, I think people will always have desperation. Just because you now have a roof over your head doesn't remove things happening to you in life. I would hate to be in a situation where we just want to maintain homelessness so we'll get the next M&M coming out of that. I think there is always going to be struggle. I'm just saying that struggle doesn't have to come from not having food, not having a roof over your head. Look, there's something to be said for struggle, great poetry, great songs, everything comes from that. But I don't see struggle going away just because we've given people, again, we're not saying that people are going to we're not giving them, $50,000 a month to live off. We're just saying, here's enough to get some basic needs met. What you do after that is up to you. And again, if you want to paint all day and maybe your paintings don't have commercial value, but they're meaningful to you, why shouldn't you be able to do it? It's your life. Why shouldn't you be able to do something that gives you joy in your life? It doesn't make sense that, hey, we're going to tie you here to this computer. You're going to work all week on this computer, inputting numbers, and then on Sunday you can go and paint for a little bit. To me, that, as humans, creativity is one of those key things that we have over and above the animals. We can build, we can do these sorts of things, and yet we're not having the time and space to be able to explore them. Now, a lot of people might think, well, that's the Illuminati keeping us all on that treadmill so that we don't have time to question things and people at the top can go and live their best lives. But I'm saying that we need to question this. Is this really what we want from society? Because in my opinion, when one of us suffers, we all suffer. So it's not in our interest to let anyone suffer.
No, I know exactly what you mean, but I think sometimes things don't always work out how you think they should or would. So, for example, there's something called the Jevons principle, whereby if you make cars more efficient, you would expect less fuel to be used. But what actually happened, so with trains, for example, the coal consumption went up because although it was more efficient, people started to use it more. So cars got driven. Like if your mileage went down by 90%, I'd be taking trips more than I do now. And you end up spending more. It's a principle. And another one would be, for example, if you create a business to solve a problem, sometimes that business just ends up keeping the problem around because it's there in order to keep the problem. So, for example, a lot of big pharma, for example, are they there really to actually cure, or are they to generate patients? So I think sometimes when idealistically you want something to happen, it doesn't necessarily work out exactly that way. And I think that with the basic income, I think on paper sounds like a great idea. Give everyone a survival net, as it were, over and above what we already have now, of course, with regards to benefits, etc. But maybe it's not going to work out exactly how we think. I mean, does anything ever?
Well, look, the thing with UBI, it is actually rolled out in places around the world. The Marshall Islands has just rolled it out for their people. There have been pilots in different countries around the world. So, yes, you've got the law of unintended consequences at play, but I wouldn't say, well, let's give up just because what if that doesn't work out? We've still got to have a go. We've got to set goals and we're going to go after them. And I think having a goal of trying to give everyone a minimum quality of life is not a bad goal.
No, I agree. I think that is a good goal. But again, I'm here to look at ideas and see if there's any alternatives and what the strength of ideas are. So I mean, look, I think the way that the world is going with regards to AI and things like that, then I think yes, I think a universal basic income is very likely to come in. But I think again there is issues with skills, because if AI does everything, do we then lose the skills to do things that we would have passed down generationally? Like, I mean, look at the pyramids, for example. We've lost the technology of how to do that. And do you think that there comes a time where we do, or do you think actually, well, AI is always there for us to reskill if we need it?
Look, I don't see AI taking over everything, but it certainly will replace some jobs. Um, I think this is a defining moment for us. It's kind of like when COVID happened and we all got locked down and everything, all the businesses closed. And I remember here where I'm from in Melbourne, Australia. All the central business district was closed down, and when things started to reopen again, life had kind of changed a little bit for everyone. People were working from home, they were spending more time with their families. There was a lot that was changed, and yet there was still this push for everyone to go back to the city, to get back to how it used to be, to normal life. And for me, that just seemed like a missed opportunity. We had an opportunity right there and then to reinvent ourselves, and I don't think we took it. What was being fed to us was, all the cafes and restaurants in the city, they need customers back, so let's go and bring everything back. Um, and that was really driven by economics, but there was not a chance to actually say, well, hang on, maybe the CBD, if people were distributed working from their local suburbs and they were back in their communities, and that actually seemed to do a lot of good too, maybe we should explore that further and look at, well, maybe the CBD should be used for something else. Maybe it shouldn't be everyone gets in their cars, hops on a train, drives there every day, does work, drives back again every day. We could have had a pause, and that's what they called, COVID was the big pause. But I don't think we actually took that pause and did anything with it in a way that we could have reinvented ourselves. And I think now with AI here, we can go one of two ways. I think there is pushback now. People are seeing, their LinkedIn feed, their Facebook feed just filled with AI stuff. And what that's done, talking about unintended consequences, is forcing people to look at their feed and question and just go, I don't even trust anything anymore that I'm seeing. I don't know what to believe, what's real. So this push to let's embrace AI, everything started becoming AI in your feed, but now there's the pushback the other way to go, I really value authenticity. I really value human creativity more now. And I think that's going to continue. And eventually we're going to find this middle ground where things will settle and AI won't be, let's use it for everything. It's going to be, well, AI has a place and that's where we'll use it. But humans still need to be front and center. And I think we're still trying to figure that out. We're not quite there yet.
Yeah, 100%. I think, even in the UK, for example, COVID did have an impact in respect of people are still working from home. I don't know in Australia, for example, if people went straight back to work and maybe some people stayed working from home, I'm not sure. But definitely here, it has still had a lasting impact with regards to how we work. Coming back to the AI situation, I do think that there's either end of the spectrum. One is that, AI destroys us, which is, well documented anyway. Or the other is kind of as you said, it's we get the paradise. AI does all the shit jobs and we can do what we want. We've got universal basic income, and that's the paradise. But I think there is something in the middle, that difficult part where some people are still working, they're earning a good living, others are working off universal basic income, which, as you said, is going to be very minimal. So then you start to see a working versus non-working divide. But then you might get, well, actually, the non-working's better because you get loads of free time. And yes, you're not, going out to fancy restaurants, but you can do what you want. So then maybe there's a resentment of people who actually work. So there's a lot of sort of questions within how we navigate that space. Like coming back to the very start of the conversation, you go into businesses and look at how the systems operate and see what can be improved. If we were to look at the world as a system, you can start to see what potential pitfalls could arise and, what the offshoots of that might look like.
Well, yeah. And look, the philosophy is effectively framing society in a different way. So the first half of the book actually talks about the concepts of the philosophy, about thinking differently, about overhauling our education system to change the people that come out of it, and therefore impacting all those other systems in society. And the second part of the book is looking at those systems. What could we do to change things? So questioning things in the political system, education, business, health, economic systems. So there's not one thing we need to change. There's a whole series of things that are all interconnected that need to happen together to be changed in order for us to evolve. Um, the crux of it, where it all, the spoiler alert for you, is that I don't believe we can just change a few things today. I think we're too far gone, right? That's my honest opinion, is that things are so entrenched the way we do things. If people are sitting at the top and making tons of money, there's no motivation or reason to want to change things, right? They're doing quite nicely. So it really comes down to the next generation. That's where I see the real change happen. So the book is basically pitching the idea that we overhaul the education system so that rather than schools being institutions that teach subject matter, they become incubators for nurturing great human beings. So that means we're teaching life skills, we're teaching values, we're teaching respect, empathy, gratitude, those sorts of ideals that change the way people view the world, so that when they come out and go into politics, they're not seeing the world in the same way that we do now. Now, that's going to be a multi-generational approach, because then they'll eventually have kids who will also come through that system. And over time, over a few generations, we'll start to see it change. I wish I could say we could change something today, put some programs in place, but we're already trying that, right? And I don't think it's working, right? We try to solve homelessness, poverty, domestic violence. We could solve them tomorrow. We could solve these things absolutely. It's not for a lack of housing. It's not that we don't have the resources. It's that we don't have the will. We choose not to distribute wealth equally. We don't prioritize it. So again, we could do it today, but we don't want to solve it because we're choosing other things first. And that is not a resource issue, that's a mindset issue. And unless we change how we think, all those other things won't change.
The thing is, I agree with you. I think that school needs to be overhauled. It's made for workers in the industrial revolution, whatever. We have to remember certain things. We cannot question authority. Failure is bad. Working in a group is seen as cheating, when actually collaboration is what we do in real life. So I think there needs to be a massive overhaul. But my question is then, we know that, the elites know that, governments know that. The question is why it's not being done. Is it done purposefully to make us, good employees that don't question authority, that listen and contribute to the system that, again, as you said, benefit those people at the top? So maybe it's a purposeful thing. Maybe we, on the ground can see. It's a bit like Adolf Hitler, for example, when he went to Russia, tried to take Russia in the war, and his soldiers were telling him it's too cold, and he said no, press on anyway. But he's got people on the ground there that are telling him the conditions are too cold, but he didn't want to listen. And sometimes as a good leader, you need to see and ask people what's happening on the ground. You're not involved, and even though you might see something, being involved in something is very much a different experience. And even if you try to imitate it and say, oh, let me go and sit in a classroom, the fact that you're at a different level, or you're looking at it from a different perspective, you will never experience it in the same way.
Yeah, well, that's right. And look, you rightly point out that the current education system is a throwback from the Industrial Revolution, which was its aim was to mass produce as many people as you could into the workforce to improve the country's GDP, right? So, and that we're still mass producing kids. We're not doing enough to individualize learning. We're not really looking at the person and going, well, this person's not a sciencey math person. They're actually a creative. Yet everyone's got to go through the same system, get educated in the same way, and it's not till much later on in your learning plan that you actually get to diverge out and choose your specialties. I think we're forcing kids to stay into certain subjects way too long, and it makes a number of them feel like failures because if I'm not a math oriented person and I'm a creative person, forcing me to learn cos, sine, tan for things that I'll probably never use in my life and I struggle to understand is not great for the system, and it's not great for the child. We need to do more. And that's why I look to things like Montessori as a way where there is more specialization on the child themselves. And, I think we can learn a lot from that for the mainstream system. And yes, we all know it needs to be overhauled, but who's going to do it? If you're in government, you're only in there for a short time. So are you going to take a risk on doing something that's crazy, and risk your popularity? Or are you just going to toe the party line and keep your head down and stay in as long as you can? And that's one of the challenges that I see that we face right now. And I call that out in the political system as well.
I like that you said Montessori. I actually wrote that down while you were speaking before you said it, because I was going to say the same thing. My sister went to the Montessori school, and it's a real good way to just explore, or for the kids to explore and find what they find interesting.
Yeah, and
But
that's what we should be doing, right? Rather than us dictating, this is what you will learn. Every child is different. And look, in the Industrial Revolution, yeah, mass production, you don't have time to go for looking at the individual. You just need to get your army out there into the workforce as much as possible. So, but I think we're not there now. We have the ability now to look at people and understand I'm different, you're different. We shouldn't be learning exactly the same material in the same way. I might be a visual learner, you might be an auditory learner, right? But we all have to learn it the same way. So I think there's a lot that needs to change in the education system. And I think if we do that, we stand a good chance of actually changing the people that come out that become our next humans in society. And I think we need to question that and look at that.
But don't you think, like you said about the basic income, UBI, that there needs to be a base level of income? Don't you think there also needs to be a base level of knowledge? So knowing some maths, knowing some English, knowing some
Yeah.
science, even if you're going to be uh, a performer of some kind, where maths is never going to come into the equation. And people say, look, work on your weaknesses. I disagree with that. I think it's a related weakness that you need to work on. Like if you're a footballer and you're bad at maths, you don't spend time, reading math textbook, as you said, trigonometry, etc. But you work on your weak foot because it's related to what you're trying to achieve. And I think that's where people get it wrong. I work on your weaknesses, but I think they mean related to the actual sort of job or role you're trying to
Yeah,
move
but the
to.
system doesn't do that. The system says, well, everyone has to learn all this right up until here. And I'm saying, yeah, absolutely. You do need a foundational amount of knowledge for just getting by in the world, right? Reading, writing, arithmetic. We need to all know that. But do I need to know everything in trigonometry to that level if that's not an area of interest? I'm saying the specialization should happen earlier. So we need better tools to identify within a child where they're heading and be able to give them and nourish them that. As you said in the Montessori method, giving a child the ability to find themselves, to have the ability to explore and not be confined. And I think we need to do that mainstream because, for children, play is a creative outlet that allows them to explore options. And if we block that out and just say, no, you're going to learn this, this, and this, and tough, that's just how it is, I've seen kids just struggle at school because they don't get it. It's not their thing. Now, we're better these days than we used to be. There are a lot more supports in place, and you can have someone in the classroom with you to assist. But, I think we can do it a lot better.
But isn't there an element within that people change? So, for example, the interest I had at 5, 6 years old, I have some of them still, but some of them I don't because I've now changed as a person. It's like, your development as an individual it changes through time. And I think this is actually one of the good things about AI is that you could specialize education based on the questions the kids were asking, based on if they're auditory or visual learners, based on the experience of previous teaching to that child, how they best understood it. Was it by them doing a quiz? Because some people learn by mistakes. They get the wrong answer, they redo it, and they get the right answer, and they understand it that way. For other people, they can understand the concept through discourse. Other people need to know steps A, B, and C. Some people need to actually have a discussion, or read a book, or listen to an audiobook, or listen to a podcast where people are discussing ideas. So I think that once it's all about understanding yourself, the whole know thyself. I think that's the biggest thing. And as a kid, it can be difficult for people to understand who they are. They might have
it's too soon for kids to do that. But as you rightly point out, some people like to read a book, some people like an audio book, right? And yet when you're at school, we all learn the same way. We're all in the class together. We all learn the same material in the same way. So again, we're not thinking of the child, we're thinking of the curriculum only. And I'm saying we need to turn that around. We need to look at the individual and say, maybe we can't have 30 different curriculum, but we can basically say there's, 2, 3, 4 different types of people, and we should tailor some sort of curriculum that way. So if you're more arty, I'm not saying you learn no math, you learn no science, but we find that balance that's right for that person. Because if I'm a sciencey person, I love science, then maybe I don't want to spend time doing so many art classes, sports classes, music classes. I'm just saying that everyone gets a standardized bit of everything. And we say, well, that's so everyone can get exposed to everything. But then that's how it just stays. You don't actually, until you're, in the much later years, that's only when you get to special. And all I'm saying is that should happen earlier.
So what stage do you think that should happen? Is it as early as like 4, or is it 6, or?
No, I think you're still getting a foundational learning at those ages. I would say, when you're 12, 13, I think you should really start to be able to get more into the things that drive you.
Because I was just looking at this. That's what I was just searching for. I really like the Plato quote. I forgot even who wrote it, but I remembered the quote. It's like, do not train a child to learn by force or harshness, but direct them to it by what amuses their minds, so that you may be better able to discover with accuracy the peculiar bent of their genius, of the genius of each, rather. And I think that just sums up exactly what you're saying. Is that, we're not forcing them by harshness and do this, do that. We're allowing them and directing them to what amuses them, and to find their genius. Because, if you put someone like Mozart playing football, he's going to be awful. And, people might correct me if I'm wrong. He might have been great. I don't know. Just an example. Messi, if he's going to play the violin, he's probably awful. But you have to be able to understand everyone is a genius in their own right. I know some people who aren't very clever at all, but their networking skills, their social awareness, unbelievable, so funny, etc. But they're not very smart at all. And on the flip side, super smart people that can't even hold a conversation at all. So yeah, I think, okay, there is an element of develop some skills and stuff like that, but also what's their natural affinity.
Yeah, and that's it. And I always start from the viewpoint that every human being is a miracle, right? The fact that we're even here is a miracle. So rather than just taking for granted and going, oh, that person's a bit stupid, No. We're all actual miracles. If you think what it takes for us to even exist is incredible. So from there, let's start from there in how we see people. And if that's the case, then why am I getting pushed to do something? Why am I, I know myself, things that I was learning at school that I didn't get, it didn't connect with me. And yet after school, in my own time, I got into it myself because I found a way to connect to that material. I found a way where it made sense to me. And so I think we need more ways to, as I say, we need to understand, we need the assessment tools, first of all, to look at a child and get a sense of where they're heading. Now, as you rightly say, you change over time, right? But staying in standardized schooling doesn't necessarily change you. You're going to change because of a whole raft of influences. So shouldn't what you're learning and what you're exposed to reflect that rather than you just having to go through that? And if you see a child with learning difficulties or someone who's struggling, it smashes their self-esteem, right? When they are just put down as being stupid, right? Because it's not because they're stupid, there's just a misalignment, right? Often between the subject matter, the teacher, whatever it is, and the child. And we can avoid all of that if we go child-centric. And I'm not saying we just let children run riot and they can do anything that they want. I'm saying there needs to be some structure, but I'm saying there also needs to be some choice and flexibility within that structure.
But there are examples, though, aren't there, of athletes. So I don't know the Venus, the Williams sisters in tennis, and Jimmy Pedro, judo player, who swear blindly that their parents forcing them a little bit was part of their major success. Because if you leave it up to kids, I suppose they're like, well, can't be asked. So do you think there's an element of trying to understand where that genius lies, but also then having a mentor there to help guide them to excellence?
Look, mentoring's fine, but Venus Williams could have been an impressive violinist for all we know, had she had those other choices available to her. So she was obviously guided at a very young age, and her sister too, to follow a particular pathway. So what does that do? Well, it removes some of the other opportunities available to you because you're so stuck in that path. And I'm saying school does the same thing. It pushes you down a particular rabbit hole and it doesn't expose you to other things that might be out there because, hey, it's not, if we're in academic school, it doesn't sort of fit that mold, or it's not going to give you a job in the future. There's all these things that, are putting pressure on what a child is exposed to and what they get to. And all I'm saying is you've got Montessori, you've got Steiner, you've got a number of different options out there. But again, they're on the fringe. And I think there's some really great learnings from those systems that should become part of the mainstream education system.
So what other ideas have you got in the book then about, society and ways to fix it?
Well, look, as I mentioned, I see most of the problems in society today come from a lack of respect that people have to each other and to the planet. That's where I think everything stems from. Like, if we respected people and we saw people as miracles, we wouldn't let anyone be homeless. We wouldn't let people go without food, right? That for me is a lack of respect. So the problem is that we try and tackle individual issues. We try and tackle homelessness, domestic violence, whatever the issue is. We have pockets that are out there trying to deal with those issues. But to me, it makes no sense that that's the way to tackle it. Because if the underlying problem is a lack of respect, surely we should be treating that. And then you knock out a whole lot of issues in one go. Because, if I'm, if I speed when I'm driving, right? So they'll send me to traffic school, and I've got to learn that it's not a good thing to speed and I shouldn't be doing that. Or if I'm drink driving, I've got to hone my ways. Okay. So I go to school, I learn I should be a better person, a better driver. Great. But then I come home and I beat my wife because everything is being taught in a certain way only. We're trying to deal with an issue. And I'm saying the underlying cause of all those issues is a lack of respect. So if you treat that, then I'm going to see the world differently. I'm going to see my wife differently. I'm going to see others differently. And the way we do that, as I said, is through changing the education system.
Yeah.
You know, the curriculum I'm talking about is, I talk about 4 relationships, right, in the book. There's the first one is our relationship with the universe. So that is, what a miracle that we're here. How incredible is nature? How incredible is every single human being? When you start from that point of view already, you start to shift. It's like when you watch a David Attenborough documentary. You watch it and you feel, wow, the world is incredible. How amazing is nature? But then the next day you go off to work and you go back to your normal life and you repeat your usual behaviors because we haven't actually shifted you as a person. But we deep down know that our connection to the universe is very important, and yet there are other things pulling us away from it. You know, I've got to make money, so if I have to take advantage of someone to make money for myself, well, I'll go and do that because I've forgotten that that person's a miracle too, and you know, I'm just going to take them for granted. So that's the first one. The second one is our relationship with ourselves. Do we truly understand what it is to be human? Do we understand our limitations? Do we understand our triggers, patterns, the programs that are running in our mind automatically that they're even invisible to us, but they keep running and they affect everything that we do. So learning about ourselves, because when you're at school, they don't teach you how to be a self, right? There's very little of that, right? It's you know, what job do you do? What do you do? But very little about exploring the person, like deep down. That I think is something that we need to do more of. The third one is our relationship with our inner circle, our family, friends, and the local community people who we engage with. Often we treat strangers better than we treat people we know. That's because we've developed a pattern. We've already developed a way of engaging with certain people, and it's almost autopilot, right? Because it's just so ingrained and programmed into us. So those relationships are important. And then the final relationship is our relationship to community. And that's everyone on the planet that we don't know. We are still connected by an invisible thread called humanity. And yet, for many of us, it's like, well, out of sight, out of mind. And so these things need to be taught in school in an age-appropriate and a culturally sensitive way across the globe so that the world over the next few generations grows up thinking differently. These are things, you know, that they may be done as an excursion to a museum or to meet another school. They're just sort of by the way kind of thing, tick box. But I think this needs to be part of our curriculum on a weekly basis so that it is as important as teaching math and science, you know, how to be a good human.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're missing.
I think, yeah, society is just a collection of individuals. If all of the individuals are, you know, a good, moral, you know, intelligent, empathetic, then society becomes all of those things also. I also think, though, that the chance of changing school on the whole is going to be difficult. But I think your message can even be related to the household. You know, if your school, you find that it doesn't, you know, allow for understanding the kids or showing morality and gratitude and all these things, take it upon yourself as a parent to instill those ideas into your kid from a younger age. Because even if it's just your 6 kids or 5 kids, they can have that impact on other people as well. If they're not picking it up in school, maybe they can be the spark that changes how that school or even the kids within the school behave. So I think the message is strong.
I agree and I disagree. So I agree. That's exactly what we should be doing. 100%. The home is where our kids should be getting their values from. However, the problem is that is not a consistent experience across all households. And so you've got flawed parents to begin with who are passing down their way of seeing the world. What does that look like? It's going to vary household to household. Some households, the parents are absent. They're either working or they're not present to give their kids those sorts of values. And so where do the kids go? They go and meet up with other kids. They become parts of gangs, and that becomes their influence group. And so I agree it should come from the home, but I'm being totally realistic here and saying that's not happening. It is in some homes, of course it is, absolutely. If you're lucky enough to be brought up in a loving home and you've got parents who have great values and they pass them on, 100%. But what I'm saying is we can't guarantee that everyone is getting that. And that's why I see an overhauled education system as a single touch point that every child globally is exposed to. It's the one place we can actually make a difference on a large scale if we have the mindset to want to do that.
So is there anything else within the book that we've maybe not discussed?
Oh, there's a lot of stuff in there.
Okay.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, we can talk about the individual systems in society. I do talk about loyalty, right? Loyalty is a great value to have, right? If loyalty should be valued. But if you look at things like banks, right? If I've been with you for a long time, I'm almost ignored. But if I'm prepared to come over as a new customer, well, hey, you'll waive your interest, your fees and everything for an interest-free period to attract me over. Why? Because it makes more profits for you.
But
And yet we know deep down, we know loyalty. If I've been with the bank for a while, I should actually be receiving some kind of benefit for being there longer. And yet I can queue jump as a new person, transfer my balance over to this bank, zero interest, whatever. Because what we're saying is we value profits more than we value good, loyal customers. And really what should be happening is the longer you've been with the bank, the greater the benefit you should be receiving. So the incentive is there to switch to that bank and stay with that bank. But we don't do that. And this is the part of the problem that we experience is what I write about in the book. There's true north and there's magnetic north. True north is that loyalty should be valued. Magnetic north is that profits pull us away from that true north value. And I'm just saying there are lots of instances of that in society.
But I think the word loyalty there, it depends on the interpretation. So are they loyal to their customers or are they loyal to the shareholders?
Yeah, that's right.
So I think that how do you determine loyalty? So for example, I could be loyal to myself or my family or my city or my country or whatever else, my pub. So I think loyalty exists, but it's maybe misplaced in the wrong areas. I think that's probably what I think you're alluding to, is that the loyalty is inverted to be in the wrong places when it should be in the right places. I think that's what you're saying.
Well, look, in that example, you think about it, it's a flawed system that says, which master do I serve? Am I working in the best interest of my customers or in the best interest of shareholders? Because those things can be completely at odds with each other. And that's why I say there's often misalignments just because of the structure that exists, particularly in, capitalism. It's all about how can I generate more wealth? That's the end goal, right? Now, if I can help people along the way and I can build things and I can do, that's great. But often what happens is that driver of making profits at all costs is what comes to the fore, and people suffer as a result of that.
Love it. Is there anything else that you want to mention before we close off?
Look, there's lots in there. All I'm saying is, look, if you'd like to get hold of the book and find out more, it is available. It's on Amazon. It's available as a paperback, a Kindle, and an audio book on Audible as well. There's lots of stuff there. There's also the website, which is thephilosophy.net. Go and check it out. You'll find out a little bit more there.
Had a great chat, man. That hour's gone super quick. We covered a lot of ground as well, interesting ideas, and it's always nice to have a discussion with someone of a very intelligent mind that has good ideas, that has a vision that they want to see be brought into fruition. So thanks again for being on the show. And
thanks for challenging me. I always love a good discussion.
I love a good discussion as well, and it's not, and to be honest, it's not to discredit anyone. It's just to actually sometimes give people an opportunity to actually show how strong their ideas are. The whole steel man, straw man, and all this sort of fallacies, whatever. So yeah, I think you had some strong points. So that's awesome, and yeah, thank you again.
And thank you. Cheers.